thank everybody for attending this evening. I'm actually going to turn it over to Mr. Ward to start our budget plan.
Yeah, so thanks for coming out, everyone. You're going to hear from me and Mr. Palencia this evening. We have a set of slides to go through, and we'll certainly entertain. Am I not loud enough? So we'll certainly entertain questions at the end. There's usually questions from the public. There'll be a period of time, and also the board will entertain questions at the end. But we're certainly here to answer any and all questions that you have. So we'll leave plenty of time for that. Our presentation usually is about 15 or 20 minutes, sometimes a little bit less. He and I are kind of getting our rhythm. This is our 4th year doing this together, so we'll go through that. My name is Daniel Ward. Probably should have started there. I'm the superintendent here at Hudson Falls. And again, if I'm not loud enough, just raise your hand. I'll speak up a little bit for you. And I'm just finishing my 4th year here, and I'll let Mr. Palencia introduce himself, if you don't mind, and then I'll start.
Kevin Palencia, Executive Director of Business and Human Resources. And I'm finishing my 16th or 17th year here, so.
So now you know who we are. So Mr. DiCaprio is going to run through the slides. So again, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it. This is, I think, more folks than we had last year. But I'd have to look at the attendance to be certain. So we always try to start with our budget development goals. And those have remained the same for a couple of years. That's not because we don't want to revamp it. That's because we set a set of goals, and we're still striving to achieve those goals. So I always like to start by talking a little bit about where we're trying to head, and also what we're doing when we're developing a budget. So we're always looking at school safety. Anybody who pays attention to the news, and I'm sure many of you do, every school is always trying to do everything they can to make sure our students, faculty, staff, and visitors are safe while they're here. So there is a portion of our budget that's going towards school safety again this year, as it does every single year. We do try to be fiscally responsible. We want to make sure that we aren't spending money in areas that we don't need to spend money in. We review the budget every year, along with Mr. Palencia and all the principals and all the heads of departments, to see what things we can phase out, what new things we might need, and how to do that in a manner that doesn't break people's backs. We want to support our district mission. Anybody who's been to a meeting here before or watched online knows that often we refer to the mission and the goals of the board. They're over on the wall. I'm not going to read them all to you. They do appear in this presentation, and the presentation will be available tomorrow on our website under the business office link. So we do make sure that what we're doing for our students and for our school districts supports the mission of the school and the goals that were outlined in the strategic planning process we went through last year and the year before. So we're working through those same goals that you see up there. Moving forward, I'd already referred to both, but I put them in here. We have a lot of people that come back and look at the presentation after the fact, so we want to make sure they can see them, because I can't point to the wall for those folks who are watching it later on. So why do we spend this money? We like to impress upon people each and every year the number of students we have, the amount of buildings and grounds. So you can see it. Our student enrollment is 2,103 students. You can see that we have 279 instructional staff. We have 237 non-instructional staff. We have 6 buildings and the community pool. For those who know that the community pool used to be owned by the town of Kingsbury, it's been the school districts. The town turned it over to the school district. I'm not exactly sure the number of years ago. Mr. Palencia does know that, but it's ours now to take care of, and we do have quite a few young people and families who use that every summer, and we do teach swim lessons every single summer at that community pool. The 6 buildings are your 5 school buildings, and I count the bus garage as a separate building because it is in fact a separate building here on the campus. Mr. Manny and his crew take care of 431,000 square feet of building space, and we have 156 acres that the grounds crew is also responsible for, and we're responsible for making sure that it's safe for students and staff to be on all of those acres as well. And we also help maintain Derby Park, which is owned by the village. That is not school owned, but we do have an agreement with them to help maintain that area as well. So just looking back at our budget calendar, you're here tonight. Tonight's a public hearing as required by law for us to have this, to talk about the budget and provide a time for folks to ask questions about the budget. You can see that the board adopted the budget in April. We mailed the budget notices. Those are the newsletters that many of you have in your hands. We mailed those home to you folks so that you would have them prior to this hearing, and the actual vote is on May 20th in the high school gymnasium. So the last few years, we talked about adding programs, many programs to our high school, middle school. We also talked about adding support staff like school counselors to our elementary schools. This is a year where I'm not talking about adding anything. This is a maintenance year for us. For the most part, we do have one or two things that we have been working on as part of our district level goals, and based on some feedback from some of these forums as well. And the number one add this year in our budget is the integration of a comprehensive literacy program. So that's a reading and writing program, grades K through 8. But going back to the facts of the budget for this year, so you're looking at a proposed budget of $57,299,699. You can see the budget-to-budget growth is 5%. And I hate reading the slides to you, but I want to make sure I say them out loud for the folks who are watching from home. Tax levy increase of 1.9%. And for our bus proposition, we have 5 vehicles on there. We do receive 90% state aid the year after we purchase. And the reason why there's 5 this year, again, if you are watching the news, you're hearing about EV buses. So this is for 5 diesel, Aaron. All 5 are diesel. So they're all fossil fuel buses. They're diesel and or gas buses. These are not for EV buses. The reason for us asking for an additional vehicle to our normal request of 4 is because this is the last year. This is the last year under current law when we'd be able to get a fossil fuel bus. The law said before they passed the most recent budget, several weeks late, that you could not get a fossil fuel bus after this school year. So a fossil fuel bus is about $150,000. I'm rounding a little bit. When you go to an EV bus, you're talking about it being $400,000 or better for a single bus. So we're trying to buy the fossil fuel buses, the diesel and gas now, which will give us some more time if and when they come to a hard deadline on the EV buses. So our buses normally last us about 10 years, so we're trying to get ahead of it by buying the fossil fuel buses while we can, or the traditionally fueled buses, I guess I can say it that way. For the board, we have 2 seats open. We have received 3 petitions for that. One is Amanda Landsman. She's running unopposed for her seat. And for the second seat, we have 2 people, Samantha Malucci and Adriana Strong. They're both on the ballot, so one of those 2 people will be elected as well, unless there's a writing candidate that gets more. But those are the 3 folks that we received petitions from. There's information about them on our school website as well, if you don't know all of those people. So moving on to the focus on students, I tried to skip ahead before. The big buy for us this year for academic purposes is the literacy program. The K-8 literacy program is about $500,000. That is the program that we're buying this year. Not to say that it's any small amount, because it is a large amount, but that's exactly where it's going. The money's going to literacy. Last year we talked about phonics. The budget does maintain the phonics instruction that's required by the state of New York, which we are actually seeing some really nice gains with our elementary students, and there's some elementary folks out there in the crowd today shaking their heads. So we're really working hard at reading and writing with our students, and there's some investment that had to be made there. We did a pretty lengthy review process. Mr. DiCaprio headed that up with the principals to come to the program that we are purchasing for our teachers to use with our students. So the second bullet, it maintains the phonics. It also maintains the focus on reading at the middle school. 2 years ago, we started teaching reading at the middle school to all students. And because we were seeing students who were coming from the middle school that were not on reading on grade level. So we do want to address that. So now we're addressing reading all the way up through grade 8. Even though many of us maybe went to high school, reading was something that you didn't hear about in middle school, was something from kindergarten, 1-2. We still have emerging readers up through the middle school. There's an awful lot going into getting our students to be better readers and writers. It maintains electives and graduation credits at the middle school, and it maintains electives at the high school. And those are some of the big things we put in over the last couple of years. About 4 years ago, there was very few elective options for our high school students, and there was only one credit, actually 2 credit opportunities at the middle school for our students. So when they came to high school, they would already have graduation credits. And now we have 4 or 5 graduation credit opportunities at the middle school for kids who, even before they come over here, they can have 3 or 4 credits because some of those 4 or 5 opportunities are only half credit courses. And there's one other large expense that we had to budget for next year. We have a number of students that have special needs, which we're required to budget for. There are waiting placements at schools outside of our school district because of the high level of need. Those students are sometimes, those placements are high cost. We are required to provide them their programming as well in an appropriate setting. So sometimes that means busing students as far as Albany or even farther sometimes. And so we have budgeted $500,000 in next year's budget to provide the programs we're required to. Some of those students have been on waiting lists for better than a year. We're doing our best here in Hudson Falls with the programs we have and the staff we have. But by law, we are required to continue to try to place them in appropriate programs based on their IEPs or individualized education plans. So that's another big piece of this budget. It's not an ad, it's a requirement. It's just we have more students that need those placements. It's not a change in our programming per se. So to take you through the revenue and the expenses, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Ponce, but we'll come back around. You'll get a chance to ask me or him questions or anybody else. So I'll turn it over to Kevin. Will you just make sure your mic is on?
It's on.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Dan. Each year when we present a budget to the public, we have to have a balanced budget, which ultimately means that our revenues have to match our expenditures as we present it. Hudson Falls is a poor school district in relation to other school districts in New York State. The wealth of a district is based on 2 items. It's income and property wealth within the district, and then they compare it to all other school districts in New York State. The average, they come up with something that's called the combined wealth ratio. It basically takes half and half of those 2 items and combines them together and compares it. The average school district in New York State is 1.0 combined wealth ratio. We're about 0.44. So the way you can look at it is we're half as wealthy or twice as poor as the average school district in New York State. That's why when you see the major sources of revenue, New York State aid accounts for 71% of the total revenue that we have come in. The local taxes account for 23%. Each year, we have to do a calculation, which is the property tax cap, to come up with the levy limit. It was advertised many years ago as a 2% cap. It's not actually, and you'll see a slide in a couple slides that shows that. The formula is driven in order to manage the levy. And last year, we increased our levy by 1.9%, and as Dan noted, we're looking to increase it by 1.9% in this upcoming year budget. Revenue, as you can see at the top, it's the state aid is our big piece. The biggest piece of state aid that we receive is foundation aid. It's a formula that somewhat has run over the past 10 or 15 years. So this year we are receiving some additional funding throughout the foundation aid, but you're under state aid, you're seeing not only the foundation aid increases, but also our expense-driven aids, which are our building aid, our BOCES aid, and both our private and public excess cost aid. That's very similar to what Dan was talking about a few minutes ago with the additional special ed costs. We get aid back the following year when we spend money on those. So if we send 5 students to private placements this year, next year we get approximately 90% of that back in state aid. So the other place that you can see the 1.9% increase on the tax levy, and then appropriated fund balance, you'll see there's a increase of $300,000. What we're using the appropriated fund balance for are these 2 items that Dan had brought up. So we're offsetting those costs because the ELA program is a one-time expense, so that's a good way to use fund balance. And also the additional special ed costs, even though that will be a reoccurring expense, the aid will flow the next year to help offset that cost. So it won't be a reoccurring expense without any revenue coming in to attach to it. So as you can see on this, our total revenues are $57,299,699, which is the same as what the expenditures are. Okay. This slide is showing you a 13-year comparison on the property tax cap. So the column in the middle is what we went out with a tax levy increase of over the last 13 years, and it's anywhere from 0 to 2%. And on the right-hand side, you can see what the property tax cap was for that year. If a district wants to go above what that cap is, they have to get a supermajority vote. Otherwise, they need a simple majority if they're under that property tax cap. And each year by March 1st, we have to do the property tax cap through the state controller's office to come up with what our maxes are. And as you can see, our max for the proposed budget year is 4.83, and we're proposing a 1.9% increase. And again, this is the chart that just kind of shows where we receive most of our funding from. Between local taxes and New York State aid, we receive over 94%, and then fees and other miscellaneous items, we receive 5.8% coming in for the total. The expenditure plan, as we go through the budget process, we start with a 4-part expenditure plan, and we break it down into general support, instruction, transportation, and employee benefits and debt service. From there, we go down to a 3-part budget that is administrative, program, and capital. And it's just easier for when we start the process to work that we work with the 4 parts, because a lot of the bottom section gets split up into 3 different areas. And we to make sure that we have the 3-part budget for the budget newsletter and the budget vote. So the 4 main areas are general support, instruction, transportation, employee benefits, and debt. And as you can see on the next slide, the biggest piece of it, obviously, is the instruction piece, which makes up 51.5%. The next largest piece is the employee benefits and debt service, makes up 34.5%. Then you have transportation in the district, which is 4.6%, and our general support, which is 9.3%. And that's basically general support. In that category is administrative costs and buildings and grounds and things like that. But you'll see in the upcoming slide that those get split out into different areas. So this is the 3-part budget. As you can see, it's administrative, program, and capital. If you look on the second page of the newsletter, it shows, actually showing it right there. It shows the chart on those 3 different areas. So basically, within the administrative piece, these are all the expenses for the Board of Education, district office, all the principals, the secretaries, the directors of buildings and grounds, and transportation all fall in this area. When you look down at the bottom, you're going to see that number that says benefits. So what it does is we split out the benefits to each category based on the employees that are in each one of those categories. So under the benefits, the school district, that's the school district share of health and dental, Social Security, ERS and TRS, depending on what retirement system the individuals are, unemployment and workers' comp, all fall into those categories, and then they're split out amongst the 3 categories based on the employees. So as we go down through the other categories, the benefits will be the same going through there. Those same benefits are split out amongst those categories. One of the things that's on here is special items, and that's the accounting category that we have. And basically what's in there is the district-wide insurance. Okay. So under the special items, it's the insurance that we have for the whole district, our BOCES administrative and capital expenses that we have to pay, along with school association dues. This also handles the personnel. Whenever we onboard employees, we have to fingerprint them and go through the whole process through BOCES. These are those costs that are associated, fall in here. Legal, obviously that's our attorneys that fall into this category. Public information, all of our costs associated with sending out newsletters and different things like that fall under this category. The next category is the program category. This is the meat and potatoes of the budget. As you can tell, it's a total of $43 million, the total of the budget. And basically what this is, from the chart that you saw before, transportation goes in here along with all of the instruction. This is basically the cost of the school district from the time we pick kids up at school, including the bus drivers, the aides, the monitors, the garage building, all of the gasoline supplies and everything, right up until we drop them off at school, and then they come in the building and they go in for instruction. And under the instruction piece is all the costs of the teachers, the aides and assistants, school security, counselors, psychologists, social workers, and social worker associates, as well as all the materials and supplies that we have for the kids and textbooks. And these are basically all the costs for the regular and special education costs across the district. Your interscholastic athletics are also in this category here. And again, the benefits is the benefits for the cost of all the employees that are in this area. The capital piece, it's plant and operation, it's buildings and grounds. These are all of our buildings and grounds expenses district-wide go into the capital piece. This is from all of our employees' salaries to the cost of maintaining the school district and maintaining the grounds across the board. Any equipment purchases that we have in there fall into this category. Along with any contracts that we have, any service contracts, things like that fall into these categories. Special items is we have to budget for a property fund refund. Property tax refund is what I'm trying to say. We do get a couple of those each year after the rolls are done, and that's where we account for them there. And then also the debt service and budget transfer. Under that is our bond, principal and interest for all the bonds that we have for construction and also school buses. Along with the transfer for special ed, we have to do a transfer for our summer special ed program to offset the costs. And we also have a transfer set up in there to offset if we do have any negative balances at the end of the year in our food service account. We have to make that account whole. So we schedule a budget transfer in case that comes about. Transportation purchases, as Dan noted earlier, we're looking at 4 66-passenger buses, 1 30-passenger bus, for a total not to exceed $760,000. That'll be Proposition 2. And the propositions. Proposition 1, a week from tomorrow, will be the spending plan of $57,299,699. Proposition 2 will be the transportation purchase of $760,000, and also on the ballot will be 2 board seats with 5-year terms. Depends how you look at it. Yeah.
We're fortunate to have folks who come and stay for a while. Yeah, we are.
May 20th is the budget vote day. It takes place in person in the high school gym between 12 and 8 p.m. Absentee and early vote option is available upon request. For information, please contact Mrs. Kelly Hensel at her email address or at 518-681-4124.
Thanks, Kevin. And so it brings it back to me, and we're going to open it up in just a second for questions. But again, back to us trying to focus in and stay on the same path. That's why I always, a lot of times with my shows, I end with the same thing I started with. So back to the mission, vision, value statement that we started with. We try to keep that in all of our conversations, and we do that consistently through all our meetings. And we ask our principals to do the same thing when they have their meetings with their staff members when we're working through. So looking to hear questions. What I would ask is that the questions are it sounds silly to say, but they're budget related and presentation related. And that we leave enough time so everybody who has a question can ask one. So we may ask somebody if they've asked 4 or 5 to wait a minute so we can see if anybody else has a question. Other than that, we'll open up the floor now, and you can address me or Kevin or the president of the board, whatever works best for you. So, who's first?
Well, look at me, I'm going to do that.
Okay. Okay. Just going to make sure that's turned on for you.
Hi, everybody. Most of you know me. For those of you who don't, I was on the board for many years, so all of this sounds rinse, repeat, and over and over again, many of the same issues. So my first question, I guess, is there was a significant increase in state aid this year, which we're very fortunate to get. But given that, I'm particularly interested in why we have so many increases in costs, given the additional state aid, and particularly given the fact that you stated that the new literacy program was being paid for out of reserves. So what is the additional state aid money going for, and why does that still amount to a 2% increase?
So I'm gonna let you speak to that. I can, but he's ready to roll.
I have a follow-up too, Kevin, sorry, before you even start. Is the amount that was listed as state aid, was that the amount that you just, I think, did you budget for the amount that actually was finalized in the state budget last week? Did we get even more?
That was, the budget came out a month late, so we
Right.
had to go with an estimate.
Right.
We were very close to that estimate.
Okay, that was that.
So it's,
So we even have a little bit more, presumably?
Um,
Because they said it was historic increases in state aid.
Not
Not
for
us.
us.
no,
No.
because what you're seeing, like when I was talking about state aid, is that a lot of those are increases in state aid or actually expense-driven aids. So the
Right.
things that we spent money on, and now we're starting to get the aid back on them. But just to give you a couple,
But just, sorry, before, so in the final state budget that was passed last week, was that more or less than the amount we budgeted for?
we got less state aid. than
We got less, okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Yep.
Okay, now,
What's that?
By how much?
Roughly $300,000. Yep.
so how is that being made up
How does that get made up?
in the budget, in your budget?
It gets made up that some areas of the budget we're going to probably have to cut back on and tighten the belt to make sure that we can, you got two choices, either you find a way to make more revenue, or we're going to have to lower some expenses, so there's some things in there that we may not be able to do this year. Things that will not be front-facing and touching kids, but some of the things in the background that we have is some different, we've got some different items we want to do, purchases with buildings and grounds and stuff like that, and we may have to wait to do those, but we're going to see how that plays out going forward.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Now you can go back to my main questions
It was great when we used to get the budget
ahead of time, yeah.
before we had to print the newsletters and things like
Right.
that, but that hasn't been the case for the last 3 or 4 years, but back to the expense piece. So Dan talked about the ELA program, which is $500,000.
Which is coming out of reserves.
Part of it is. Yep.
Okay.
The cost for the special education is $500,000 also. Okay?
So is that $1 million increase in instruction that
Yes.
was on the slide? 500 for the literacy and 500 for special ed?
Yep.
Okay.
Now, one of the things that we haven't talked a lot about is health insurance for the school district is an $800,000 increase this year. Okay? And every school district, when you look at the neighboring ones, they're getting hit in the same way. We're actually the different consortium
Right.
than the rest of which we boast.
And we've always done better being part of CASHIC, but is that not the case now, or is it?
Actually, I think we're still doing better than Wishway.
Okay.
Yes, we do. What's interesting about it is we're really getting hit in the drug cards piece of it now, instead of all on health insurance. Health insurance still is in the 8 to 10 range, but
Right, and we moved to the other plans to
Exactly.
help that.
exactly.
Has there been any thought to not being self-funded on the drug?
We've had some discussions about it, but that's, in order to do something like that, and Mary Kay, maybe you can help with this, in order to do something like that, you're several years out to be able to do that.
Okay.
So we're trying to explore, when it comes to health insurance, every option we possibly can. But just also, we've got salary increases of over $600,000 built into the budget, which those are contractual obligations that we've had. And also, we have ERS, TRS, Social Security, because as salaries go up, we're seeing increases in those because they're a percentage of the salaries going across the board too. And that's roughly $235,000. So when you see these increases, it's actually over $3 million in increases. And the budget's only going up $2.7 million. So we've gone in and done some cuts throughout the budget to even accommodate those.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Very helpful. Just one other question, I guess. You talk about the literacy program, and I've heard about literacy programs new programs every couple of years. We've been trying them over and over and over and over. And so what's new and different about this new $500,000 program that's different from what we've been trying for so many years?
You want to speak to it, Mike? Yep, I'm going to ask Mr. DiCaprio to speak to it.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Mike DiCaprio, your assistant too. Yeah.
Hi.
So, well, actually, I'm going to say part of this is back to basics. At the K-8 level, it follows the science instead of following the latest trend. So we're getting away from workshop, which you would have adopted when you were here. It's been about 7, 8, maybe 9 years since they adopted workshop. All the evidence points to workshop was not what it was billed to be. This one follows the science of reading, which actually goes back to what the experts have been saying for 40, 50, 60, 70 years now. That's one piece of it. The other piece that this one does that workshop hasn't for the past, whatever it is, 7 or 8 years, is that the term these days they're using is knowledge-based, meaning it focuses on all that background knowledge that our kids don't come with. So it re-emphasizes the science, the social studies, things that they'll take into those classes. So hopefully they're not starting from scratch there when they get up to high school readings level. The only other thing I'd add, if you have other questions, the only other thing I'd add is you typically want to do those reviews every 5 to 7 years, and it's been I've been here 6, so it's been at least 7 or 8 since you've looked at it, and you understand how there's mission drift, right? So you adopt it, and somebody retires, and somebody replaces, and somebody comes. Yeah. So it's been at least 7 years since we looked at it.
Okay,
Does that help?
it does.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Mike. And I'm okay if you want to ask it from your seat too, if there's other folks. The mic's just so that the people at home can hear, but we can hear you just fine. But you're up?
Are we on? We're on. Good evening, Tim Havens, Senior. Here for my annual diatribe. First I want to say thank you for the opportunity to address you. I really wish that we as the public and as the people that are paying the local share of this, the tax levy, would have an opportunity before the budget is crafted to know before the newsletter came out. And I guess in this electronic world, if you could let us know when there are budget workshops so that those of us that care could come and participate, I certainly would try to make the time to do that. Because I think our school is certainly the nucleus of our community, but it is the most expensive tax that we pay, and it scares me. I'm all about sustainability. Like some people that just pack up and move, I've got a life sentence here. I'm going to have to stay forever, and I'm proud to live here, proud to be a member of this community, but I'm scared right to death about sustainability. We own a couple of family businesses. We have a farm. We've got a few rental houses and some commercial property, and I will tell you that school taxes taken off a bite out of our life, and we're supposedly have a little money. And so I really worry about my customers, the other constituents in this community, and their ability to pay and sustain their life. Unfortunately, real estate is a funny thing, and we have people that are, ditching town and leaving, and they're selling their homes for inflated values to people who come from another part of New York State, most of the time down in the city where the cost of living is a lot higher. They come up and they pay exorbitant prices. And so then when our esteemed assessor, who I have the greatest respect for because she is well-read, well-educated, and well-credentialed, but the state forces her to reevaluate properties every year. And when people flee and sell their property for a ridiculous amount of money, that becomes the comparison that the assessor uses to levy it onto the rest of us. And those people are left, they laugh, they don't even come back to say goodbye. They get, a bit
War on their $250,000 house, they sell it for $339, and they're so darn happy to leave, and they never come back. And yet that 339 becomes the new high water mark that the assessor looks at. And this happens time and time again, and has happened time and time again. More so in the last 10 years than in the 10 years prior to that. So we are getting a barrage of bad news. One, most everybody in Kingsbury has gotten reassessed for a substantial increase. Has got rental houses that have gone up by 50%. The dealership went up by 40%. Our home went up after having gone up last year. I mean, enough, when is enough enough? Now, that's only assessment. And like I tell everybody when they come unglued about their assessment, that's what somebody sold property like yours for. You can't be mad at the assessor. The business is done right here. This is the most expensive tax that we pay. We pay school tax, we pay town and county tax, and the people who live in the village of Hudson Falls have the additional burden of the village tax. And all of this is on us. We have people who live in homes and we're a little mill town, and the single-family homes that are still occupied by a widow or a widower of somebody that worked at GE 30, 40 years ago, these people bought their homes for $15,000 or $18,000 or $25,000 that today have assessments that are $280,000, $290,000 that result in huge tax bills that just makes it so they got to decide whether to eat or pay taxes. Now, the young people eat, but the old people pay taxes because they're of an old discipline to always pay their way, to pay their bills. And their sustainability is at risk. So in the last 2 years, we had, I'm going to have a question for you. But in the last 2 years, we've had a budget increase last year of 5.03%. I'm sorry, 8.48%, which was $4.178 million. This year is $2.745 million, another 5.03%. If you add those two together, they're a 16% increase over the 2022-2023 budget of $49,274,802. Well, if any of you are familiar with the rule of 72, you can take any number, divide it into 72, and that tells you how long it's going to take to double. So in 2 years, we've raised 16%. Divided into 72, that means 4.5 times 2 years, or 9 years. Our Hudson Falls Central School budget could double. And that's not sustainable. It's time to hold the horses back here a little. I'm up to here with mandates that come from Albany that aren't funded. And you are as well. That's the battle we fight about. Who is shouldering against these people? You know, we're a poor district. You just said it. Everybody's at a 1.00 and we're 0.44. I can remember when we were at 55% free and reduced lunch. Now it got so bad that everybody gets free lunch. You know, and free breakfast to go with that because parenthood is a lost art too. We got people throwing their feet by the side of the road, barely dressed for the cold weather, with no food in their belly. So, you know, we have to take care of children. The greatest thing any of us can do is make a positive difference in the life of a child. But it's not starting at home like it needs to be, and it's all falling here, and it's falling there. When you look at these huge numbers, we can't do it. You know, we have to start finding a way. We have no new industry coming into Kingsbury. We have people that hate the local large apartment owner, but they really ought to kiss his feet because without the additional assessments of his investment in our community, we can really get in trouble. This tax levy increase of 1.9% could be 14.9% or even worse. Thank God for his millions of dollars in investments in our community. And they said, oh, he's going to overwhelm the schools with kids. Well, case in point, we're at 2,109 or 2,103 students after being 22, 29 just 5 years ago. So we can see those apartments aren't doing us any harm. The whole socioeconomic system here is people don't want the responsibility of a lawn and a garden and having to take care of a roof and whatnot. They just want to make a phone call and get it taken care of. They're living in an apartment. They got 2 brand new vehicles in the yard, and their share of property taxes or school taxes is really nil. Their share is nil because yes, it's paid in their rent, but if you look at the sum value of 100 apartment units compared to 100 single-family homes, it's not nearly the assessment. And so consequently, their share is that much less. And furthermore, it's in their rent every month. Where we get a bill, and, you know, we get it right after Labor Day. You have a nice extra day off, and the next thing you know, wham, the mail's there. And you've got till the 30th of September to pay, unless it's a Saturday or Sunday, then you get the 1st of October. It's a big, onerous task, and I know that you're trying very hard to keep it under control, but I think we need to shoulder up against these people in Albany. The state budget just passed a week ago, and I was, Cheryl got into it a little bit here. How do you pull that Houdini act to come so close on state aid when the budget hasn't been passed?
I've been doing this a long time. This is,
You must carry a rabbit's foot,
well,
because 300,000 is a lot of money, but it's darn close.
yeah, I also was a state aid specialist in one of my prior positions many moons ago. So I look at a lot of trends, Tim, and you start to hear rumblings, and you kind of have an idea of where they're going and where they come out. A lot of times, state aid is moved, when you look across the state, there's basically the big five, which is downstate, and then rest of state. But then they break out like Lower Hudson, and they break out different regions, and they all pretty much have a share. So when they start talking about the amount of money that they want to pump into state aid, you can almost work it, that each percentage of those regions is going to get there's a certain percentage of it, and then kind of work your number and get yourself down close to that. So it's just experience of going back and looking how they've done it in the previous years. I think it's flickering back and forth. You guys can hear me. So state aid is interesting, and I don't want to go off too far on a state aid trip here.
Well,
Okay.
we need to know about it, because without state aid, we'd all be living in a
Yes.
cardboard box.
Well, I'm going to tell you this, that last year, a study was done for state aid, Rockefeller Institute, okay? And basically, the biggest piece of state aid is foundation aid. And it's based on a dollar amount per pupil, your number of pupils, and then there's some wealth ratios applied in there to kind of try to level the playing field. So when they did this Rockefeller report, it was basically an independent third-party report, and it came back, and there's many, many issues with the state aid formula. These state aid formulas some of them are archaic, okay? So, and there's different things in them. There's like save harmlesses in these state aid formulas. Okay, and what a save harmless is you can't get less than the previous year. So, the problem you have when you have a formula that's based on enrollment, number of students, what's been happening to districts in the area? Shrinking enrollments. Now, Hudson Falls, you're right, their enrollment has come down, but it hasn't come down at the same pace as a lot of other school districts in the area. So what happens in those situations is school districts will actually be saved by the save harmless provision and get more money, whereas a district that maintains or is close to maintaining their enrollments kind of gets hurt with it. And especially poor, we're a poor school district, so it really hurts us. So the big question is going to be next year, the push has got to be, we need a lot of those recommendations that the Rockefeller Institute did to update the state aid formula to make sure, and we continue to drive additional aid and poor school districts share to the poorer school districts across the state.
Someone in Albany working on enacting those changes?
Yeah, so I'm gonna jump in.
Yep.
So I probably spent 12 to 15 days in Albany this year on exactly this topic. The name Hudson Falls was talked about in session in Albany in the legislature this year, after I met with several of our legislatures and the Council of School Superintendents and the New York State School Boards Associations. Like, I'm out there beating the drum because Hudson Falls has been treated unfairly for the last 15 years since Foundation Aid came to be. We were first fully funded by the formula last year, which means for 14 years we were not fully funded, while other school districts across the state and in our region were on hold harmless, technically overfunded by millions of dollars. And I have nothing against my colleague schools, it's not about us versus them, because as you said, the best thing we can do is take care of our kids. Not exactly what you said, but I trust that they're using the money they receive to do what's best for the children in their communities too. But the numbers don't lie. Hudson Falls has been shorted for 15 years. And so that was my number one, and Heidi's on the advocacy committee, and the board has heard about this more than maybe not more than they want to, but more than they had hoped they'd have to hear about it from me. Same thing with every group in this school that has to meet with me. They have heard this information. That doesn't necessarily help with what we're talking about with our budget, but we're out there, they're hearing from me.
No, but it's important to know that you're fighting that fight for all of us. You are the highest paid person in the district, and likely the highest paid person in the community. And so we want to make sure we're getting our money's worth. We need you to advocate for this school district.
Yep.
You know, school superintendents have a history of being stair-steppers. You've worked in a few districts, and maybe this will be your last one. And I hope you have a commitment to this school like we taxpayers have to go along with the stuff that gets put out at these budget times, and then we have to suck it up and pay these increases. You see, we can't be stair-steppers. Some of us are stuck with, and we're committed. And we try to do what's right in our community, and we try to be a part of our community. And some of us just come across as being mean-spirited bitches. But that's not where it's at. It's just where our heart is in it. But we're pretty impassioned.
Yep.
And you have to know that, and you know me well enough that, yes, I got something to say out it comes. And they don't really beat around the bush on it. I want to know next why there's not a census of school buses in the newsletter anymore like there used to be. The buses were numbered, and we had an approximation of the mileage and their condition. That has disappeared out of this newsletter. I'm a motorhead, so I want to know about that stuff. And I just spoke to transportation superintendent, just asked a couple simple questions, because frankly, I care. And, I know about buses, I know about diesel engines, I know about transportation, tires, frame, and especially New York State road salt. And that's what is our biggest enemy of our school buses. We have a first-class maintenance facility. I think we have first-class maintenance people. And yet, the New York State standards are so stringent that when the salt, that the New York State Better Roads policy makes the municipalities apply, eats up our buses, we have to pitch them out like yesterday's laundry. And now we're on this looming horrible deadline with EV buses that are $450,000. Lake George is building a new bus barn, and they're not putting a diesel tank in, but they're putting an EV charging station in. These buses are unreliable, they're dangerous, and they're triple the price of a diesel engine bus. And yet, they're going to, even if you make the EV portion work and be reliable, which that science is not good right now, even if you can make that part good, you still can't get away from the corrosion of New York State road salt. And yes, you can have all the aluminum-bodied buses in the world, but the frame is steel. And the rear ends and front ends and springs and spring shackles and all that stuff is steel. And it gets eaten away. And as soon as that bus inspector sees something he doesn't like, that one gets tagged and out it goes. Now, I started riding bus 22. My driver's name was Mr. Wilson, and they lived on the farm. And I just talked to the transportation supervisor, and we are at bus number 182. That's 160 buses have been bought and sold and surplused out since I was a little boy. Now, that was a long time ago, but that's still a lot of taxpayers that bought a lot of buses. And that's a real expense that we have to look at. I hope somebody is shouldering up with the state of New York against this EV bus thing. It's an imperfect science. Are you aware that New York State has a mandate that any truck from 19,500 GVW and up, that's not true, from 26,000 GVW and up, every truck dealer has to sell one EV truck before he can sell 9 diesel powered. You know who they're shoving those battery ones to, don't you? The municipality. Because the businessmen like me who buy trucks, we aren't buying battery trucks. Because we can't have our truck unreliable. We can't have it cost 2 and 3 times as much. You know, they did a seminar on diesel semi-tractors down at Galvin, SM Galvin down in Troy. And the battery-operated semi-truck had to be hauled in because it couldn't make the round trip from Syracuse to Troy and back on a charge. So they hauled it in on a lowboy to show it. This is an imperfect science. We have to shoulder up against the foolishness out of Albany. Yes, it's where your money comes from, and maybe you guys are walking on thin ice down there because you don't want to be me, but somebody's got to be the me down there in Albany because we can't afford it.
Yep, so I'm the me, I guess. I'm the person.
Okay.
Same thing, EV buses, and that's why you saw when the budget was passed, due to our advocacy of the school districts, that they're pushing it back 2 years. So that was part of, I mean, we haven't seen all the budget bills come out, but everything that's been
They
written
are
said
pushing this back
2 years. Yeah. Two.
To start.
That's where they start. That's a start.
In a war, when one side starts to lose, the other side starts to win.
So I've spent time with Carrie Warner, who has our school district from here that way, and Matt Simpson, who has our school district from here that way.
And they're both stellar people.
And then Dan Stack about that. But I also go with a group of other superintendents from our BOCES down to Albany, meet with other legislatures, the Division of Budget from the governor's office as well. And when we do advocate for that, so we feel like we received a partial win through our advocacy by that being pushed back by 2 years, that deadline.
Okay.
At the same time, we're still asking for the 5 fossil fuel buses this year, because we didn't know it was going to get pushed back, and we need them to get our fleet ready to try to hold off long enough to see what's really going to happen with
Well, I
EV
think
buses.
we have to stay on the leading edge of staying with diesel buses for as long as we can, and you have to take care of them as best you can so we get the most years out of them. But you know, when that dreaded state inspector says that one goes, it goes. You know, there's not much you can do about that. I know you asked us to stay on topic for the budget, and this is. I want to know your position on the new proposed or done deal, because it's been done in those quarters, BOCES Center at exit 16, closing Dix Avenue and Henning Road. You as the superintendent, where's your position on that?
Yep, so initially, I had concerns, maybe similar to the concerns you have, but I'm certainly not inside your mind. We right now have a center that's maybe a mile from here, maybe a little bit more, a little bit less than 1 mile from here. We transport kids to that center several times a day, but we also transport students to the Sanford Street Learning Center over in Glens Falls several times a day. We also transport students to the Myers Center down in Saratoga several times a day.
Why do we go to the Myers Center, for certain vocational programs or
Both,
ELD?
vocational and student with disabilities, or ELD, both, because we want to give our kids access to the program. So the programs fill up, and so in order to sometimes to get a student into the program they've asked for vocational, we have to go there. And sometimes because of the coursework that they need here to graduate, there's only a morning seat there, only an afternoon seat there. You understand what I'm getting at.
I'm a founding member of the Vocational Education Hall of Fame at BOCES, and I spent a lot of years on the VOTAC advisory board until I couldn't stand another meeting because they were so busy running the school, they were forgetting to teach the kids. And that is my biggest fear of anything ever happening with any assembly of people in your position, is getting too busy running the school to teach the kids. I'm a firm believer in vocational education, and in particular, our BOCES Center. I was a chronic absentee going through school. I had older siblings that taught me how to read before I got on bus 22 that first day. So I was bored the first 3 years of school at Burgoyne Avenue Elementary School. And by the time school caught up with me, I was so used to being bored, I had a little hard time the rest of the time. I didn't like going somewhere.
Right.
So I was raised in a single-parent home. I used to BS my way out of going to school a lot. And I had a pretty bad attendance record. Wasn't out causing any trouble. I was watching Green Acres on TV or doing something in my treehouse. But I can tell you this, that when I became a BOCES student in 1979, fall of 78, I went from a chronic absentee to perfect attendance. Matter of fact, I still have the award for 2 years of perfect attendance. It made a huge difference in my life. Also, other factors being involved in vocational education, a huge factor in my life being in the Future Farmers of America. But when you get to our BOCES, we have classes that only have 17 kids in them, and they're able to take 25. And when I was in there, there was 25. They won't hire teaching assistants to help them, but they want to build a new $90 million facility, which on the very best travel conditions is 29 minutes if you stay within the legal speed under the best travel conditions from the Dix Avenue facility to the pin drop for where they're gonna build that new place for $90 million. That's 29 minutes. We are using bus mechanics. Am I wrong to drive buses?
No, it's,
On most days.
That's correct.
We are so short on bus drivers, we are using our mechanics.
they're driver mechanics, just to be.
I understand,
Okay.
but our drivers are paid one rate, our mechanics are paid another, and I dare guess that our mechanics aren't paid driver pay when they're driving. They're paid mechanic/driver pay, which costs the district money, but thank God they're willing and licensed to do this. When we have to have that additional transportation, not only time, there's only 2 hours and 23 minutes of instructional time in vocational education at our BOCES center as it is, in the morning and afternoon session. But when we have to drive those kids that much farther, that's going to drive up the transportation cost. It's going to expose that fleet to that much more of that New York State road salt. And consequently, we're going to be more stretched for drivers than we already are. And I hope this is taken into consideration. I think that whole new complex is because our district superintendent, BOCES district superintendent, is got higher aspirations, and I think she wants a notch in her belt with a new facility, just like Albany County BOCES had. Once again, we're getting too busy to run the school to teach the kids. And we need people to learn vocations. Okay, sitting behind me is a guy who rebuilds automatic transmissions. It's getting to be a lost art. Okay, we have to have people that know how to use their hands. The Bible says the meek shall inherit the world. Doesn't mean the shy people like me. It means the people that can hook up a sword pipe so the poop goes away. Or plug in the wires so that the spark cord comes out. That's what the Bible means by that. It just was a little ahead of its time. So we have to remember that these kids have to have this opportunity for vocational education. And Hudson Falls might make the 29-minute, and it will take with a bus maybe 32, 33 minutes, but it's time, you understand, to that new center. But the opportunities for the Argyle, Hartford, Fort Ann, Whitehall kids, the outliers in Washington County, are going to be hurt by that. And I think that there's another program we should shoulder against, is that new BOCES center. You see, our Dix Avenue BOCES and Henning Road BOCES are two of the newest schools in the component 31 school districts. The only one newer is North Warren Central. Those buildings are modern, they might need some stuff, but these schools here need stuff too. You know, we're always voting on some way to spend money. And I think that we have to look at the logistics of getting these kids, not only to vocational, but the ELD, the exceptional learners. I know that we have so many handicapped kids, and certainly they deserve every opportunity that the gifted kids do. You know, the rising tide raises all ships. You know, it's just, I want you to be cognizant of that. That's a very, very, very important thing. And one more.
Can I answer that question, Tim, before you move?
Yeah.
Because you asked, so initially had some concerns similar to yours about the distance and about transportation specifically. So in our initial look at this, from our school district standpoint, it's fewer drivers because it's all at one site. Fewer drivers because it's all at one site, which means combining more students onto the same bus. So in the morning, instead of sending one to Myers and one over there, we send one down. And I did the same thing. I map quested it. It's 30 minutes. I'm rounding up.
Well, I drove it.
Yeah, I get it. But I map quested it, and I have to go down there for meetings because they have an office center.
Yeah, right then nearby.
Close by. So, but I got on the committee because I was concerned about the outliers. I'm like, Hudson Falls, and I realized I work here. But I pay attention all around. I've dedicated my whole life to the schools in Washington County. I want to answer your question, but I'm going to end by telling everybody else who's here who I am, because you mentioned a little bit about what I should be doing. I've also signed up to be on the logistics committee for the studies that are going forward with that new facility. I'm not going to get I don't have the right title in my head, but how are people going to get their kids there and back and make sure they get there for the right amount of time? So I signed up for that committee. I'm concerned about that here for Hudson Falls, that our kids are going to get there on time, we're going to get them back in time so they can take the courses that they need here to graduate high school on time. I'm going to wrap in a little bit. We also advocated for an increase in state aid on the instructors for CTE. We've been advocating for that for 4 or 5 years. This year it was passed in the budget. we are still, the school districts, Hudson Falls and all of us are getting aided back on the first $30,000 of a CTE instructor's salary. You can guess that a CTE instructor doesn't make $30,000. It's been the same since 1991 or 2. Starting next year, it'll be aided back. I think they're going to 40,000, then 50,000, then 6,000 over 3 years. So that's a win. It's going to help us get kids there. And one other thing, you talked about your personal experience with BOCES and what that did for you. I don't know if you saw it. I think it was it last week's Chronicle, Jess? Last week's Chronicle. If you haven't read it, I'm not going to say a student's name here because it'll be inappropriate. I would say go in and read the article about the young lady. Her story mirrors some of the things you said, so believe me, we understand the importance. We have kids on waiting lists to go to CET programs because we're bound by our budget, right?
And I know tuition for CTE is a big expense.
But I'm so happy to see the advocacy to get more aid back because it's going to allow us to send more kids to cut down on our waiting list, to get those kids out to have those experiences if that's what they need. We also do a pretty good job of making sure the students that we're sending, because there's a cost associated, are vetted properly to go. But we also have to take a chance on some kids because sometimes you find the right thing, and the right thing is just the right thing. And I need somebody to rebuild an automatic transmission 5 years from now. They're not doing that level of expertise at BOCES, but we need people to do that because I learned it on the farm.
You gotta unlock schools aren't about teaching everything you need to know. It's teaching you how to learn. I've got a son who graduated from Hudson Falls High School, just missed being salutatorian by just a smidge. He was third in his class, and those two girls that were valedictorian and salutatorian worked very, very hard. But Tim went away to college, became a mechanical engineer with a second degree in physics, a minor in math, and a minor in business, all because he's a numbers guy. He worked that schedule so he could get that all in his 4 years at Clarkson. And he's my right hand in our dealership to this day, and he is our future. I'm just exceedingly proud that he is able to do that. But this school unlocked his quest for learning. He had a hunger to learn, and he took it all the way, through college, and he still has a hunger to learn. What an amazing thing to want to learn instead of being forced to go to school. I had one that did his homework with his knees up, watching the television, no matter how many times they shut the TV off. And he was a mediocre student, and I love him just the same. And he's very smart, but he's not that scholar that his older brother is. They're not all the same. But you talk about this waiting list. We're going in a million directions. You talk about that waiting list. If they hire teaching assistants, we could have more kids in CTE, and we'd have less kids wishing they were in CTE. The other thing is, when I was in BOCES in the late 70s and graduated in 1980, unfortunately, guidance counselors were using it as a cesspool. They were taking the kids that were disruptive and problematic and sending them to BOCES. And I went to school with some of them clowns, and I know some of them today.
I'll ask you not to share any names.
Please
don't.
It wasn't Dan Ward, so.
If it was me, you could share my name, but nobody else.
There was no warrants. But there was a group of kids, and I can even tell you some of the school districts that did that, but we'll leave that out. It's not important now. It was a long time ago. But it is important to vet those kids and to find those kids that have that drive to work with their hands. Because everybody's not going to carry a laptop to success. And you need them to buy and build homes and live in this community. And Hudson Falls a place they're proud to live, not a place that they were once from. They have to be able to come back here and live and be a part of this economy because somebody's got to pay the bill. Because the older people whose homes are now worth $300,000 that they paid $30,000 for, these people are paying taxes today on retirement earnings that were earned yesterday. They're not retired at the rate of today's retirees. That's not how it works. They have to pick. They have to be very careful. And yet, those are the most honorable people because they aren't going to pay their taxes late. They're going to pay no matter what. They'll go without food. They go without sending a Christmas card to a grandchild. They will pay their bills. That's the cloth that they were cast on. So the final thing I have is, what happens to unpaid school taxes, Kevin?
They could turn over to the county.
That's right. Because you don't have to do the dirty work. And the county treasurer's office does. And that's who takes people's homes and farms. When people can't pay their taxes. 3 years, you're out. Okay, and there's a little amnesty, hey, come on, let's come in and pay, let's come in and pay. And if you can't, you lose your property, and that's when they have an auction. The school gets out scot-free, they're the highest tax the people pay, but you guys don't get to be the bad guy. The county is the second highest tax we pay, they get to be the bad guy. It's reality. People lose their homes for taxes. Think about it when you go home in your nice home, in your nice warm bed, and your oil tank's full, that somebody had to choose between buying oil or paying their school taxes, or their town and county taxes, or their village taxes. It's reality. We are, not just our school is not the only thing financially stressed. We were a once proud and vibrant mill town who's lost all our major manufacturers. The only saving grace we had came in was the prison. We had an old prison and we got a new one. Now they've closed the old prison. We lost hundreds of jobs there. We have others that are catering. We've lost paper mills, we lost the cement company. Dear God, we just pray to God that Finch Prime can continue operating. And I beam with pride when I drive down Port Edward Hill and I see construction going on at Irving, and Mr. Irving putting millions of dollars in our community and creating jobs. Because those are the people that are going to do the living and the dying in this community in our future and going to pay these taxes. So, not happy about your budget increase at all, but we're going to pay them. I'm less happy about that $54 million capital project last year, but that's water over the dam. You outvoted me on that. And one more thing. Last year, you claimed on the slideshow that there was a 1.9% tax levy increase, and yet the newsletter says 0. So why did you say that there was 1.9 last year and this year, when in actuality last year you pulled a bunny out of your bonnet?
Because you're looking at 23-24, not 24-25.
Ain't you a smart guy?
So
My archives failed me.
You want 24-25?
I do, because when I come back for 25, 26, I'm gonna have my ducks in a row.
we did mail him one, right? We got more copies if you...
Probably underneath a tax bill.
So,
I think I've said all I need to say. I think everybody here has understands the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah.
Sustainability is what I'm after. I want people to be able to continue to live in this community, pay their taxes, and still be able to go down to Watkins and buy some potted plants to put on their porch. We can't let everybody squalor in poverty here. We've got to be able to live.
Thanks, Tim.
is there other, oh, go ahead, Jane.
So I have a financial program conversation. and
You're in the
I-
budget.
I know, so I would just like them, well, it's kind of both. So just before the end of the meeting, I'd like them. I just want to say something too.
Yeah, go ahead.
I never understood much about the budget, but I'm learning. And tonight was my first experience. We walk down the hall, there's no sign on where to go. My husband's got the walker, and he's fumbling because it's the person to go. And I said, what can't they afford a horse to go on?
We have one, I apologize.
And secondly, you need to buy a microphone so people like me can hear other than Canadians. I appreciate a lot that he said. I have to tell you, when I got whenever I get these every year, I call it the Christmas wish list. And I picture my kids when they were living. Santa Claus is coming. I want a TV, I want an RV. But since Santa Claus is bringing it, I want to go to Disney World, I want to do this, I want to do that. Is this budget that I want a Santa Claus list? Is it down to where it could be? And how much more is it going to cost us if that school bus thing passes?
Right, so this is not the Santa Claus list. This is maintaining programs and adding the literacy program. That's the one ad, a basic reading and writing program that hasn't been replaced in the school district in the last 7 or 8 years.
But if this proposition passes to buy these buses,
Yeah, those are the diesel buses.
how
Those are,
much more on top of this 1.9?
no, it's
included.
It's included.
I see the 1.9 and I look
She
at the...
means how much more is the total number
And I
to
say,
add the buses.
this is going to go up even more, go up any more, so this 1.9 doesn't look like much, but with your increased assessment that it's going to.
It,
And what drives me nuts when I get these things, and please don't do it anymore, the state's gonna pay for it. Who the hell do you think the state is? It's us, we gotta pay it.
Yeah, and I consistently,
It's hopeful that we're growing a money orchard down there.
I consistently say, I understand, and I know many of you talk to Tim. Tim's heard me say, I am aware that state aid is also the tax dollars from the people in our community, including me.
It looks like it's free money.
But what I would say to you, and I say this consistently, the state will spend that money. They will spend that money whether it goes to Hudson Falls or whether it goes to Long Island. So we want to make sure that we do a good job getting the programs here that our kids need to be successful and to have the careers and opportunities that a student from Long Island would get. And I get that we're not Long Island, I'm just thinking, they don't spend it here, they're going to spend it and it's going to go someplace else. But I totally recognize, and so does this board, and I don't want to speak for you guys because you guys can all talk for yourself.
I appreciate all the work that you've done to fine tune it as much as you can, but I'll favor me,
Yep.
and I'm just giving you my thoughts.
No, I appreciate it. I appreciate you coming.
Like I said, it's the Christmas wish list. Is that what it is? Or is it-
It is not. This is the first year that, since the last few years, we've received pretty remarkable state aid increases as they were catching Hudson Falls up to everybody else from the last 15 years. So the money was coming from the state, which I get is our money, but it wasn't coming from the local taxpayers. That's why before last year, we had 3 years that were at a 0% levy increase, which means the school didn't ask for a single penny more from the local taxpayers.
Tim is right. Our community is low income, people living in apartments, and older people. And people who have good jobs, they don't want to pay it all, but you can't, or quickly you'll say, you can't get one out the store.
Right.
My husband and I went a couple years ago, 10 years ago, up to Maine, and a lot of widows were selling their house on the beach, that they had planned on dying there. It was all that they had. And it was so they couldn't afford the taxes anymore, and it's happening here. It's happening, you can't stay there. But what do? You sell your house and you try to bury what you can, and then you want to get on state aid, so you can end up in a nursing home that they don't have any room for you.
Right.
That's how it is. Thank you.
Appreciate your comments.
Colleen?
I'm just curious as to how we got to, we just heard about this whole building on the boat in Mexico. And we haven't found out that they're building the building. Even though they've already decided where we tax it. Taxpayers have no input to this. We had no idea this was coming through. We decided, and everybody I talked to, even people that work there, did not know this was coming. And then it's passed. I mean, I was shocked when I read the minutes, and it was already been decided, it was gone, it was one deal. And for all this money, for something that they're not gonna own, they're gonna use the building, so we own these buildings, they own it, whoever owns it. It's just confusing me. I just was curious as to how come as taxpayers we haven't owned it.
Right, so that's based on, I'll call it New York State regulations or state education regulations. With BOCES, with the lease, they do not have to ask for taxpayers to approve the building, the leasing of a new building. What they will have to do is get taxpayers' approval to sell the old buildings, the property that the old buildings and the old buildings sit on. In order to sell that, they'll have to get approval. Yeah. I toured both buildings. Probably last October, I don't have the exact date in my head, and looked at them. Dix Avenue is definitely in better shape than Meyer Center, and going through the two. They had a building condition study done, which every school, including BOCES, is required to do on a rotating basis. And folks that were here for our building project presentation last year heard about ours, and heard the staggering numbers that come with the work that's identified by architects based on state education guidelines. When BOCES looked at theirs, the amount of money it costs to go through that list that's required to be gone through for the upgrades, the number was large. I don't have that committed in my memory either, because I'm not running their business office or their superintendent. And what they did is they looked at what the cost would be to the school districts for a new lease, as opposed to the cost would be to each individual, I'm talking about like Hudson Falls, to do the necessary capital improvements, because they're funded differently. And the difference was staggering. And I don't have those final numbers, but they shared some preliminary numbers with us. I don't know if anything's been shared more with you guys than with us, but I don't have any finalized numbers. I don't think, Kevin, that you have any finalized. Because I did make a request that I would have something before our budget hearing comes, because I figured I might get some questions about it. I just want to say, I want to let you finish your questions first. Yeah, and it's going to sound really odd later on when he comes up to sell the property at Myers. I'm getting that right? Myers Center, which is a block from the track. You folks will have, each school district's constituents will have to vote on that. And to sell that place over on Dix Ave, each school district's constituents will have to vote on that to sell those properties. And selling those properties is a part of the plan to pay for the new facility. So I'll say that out loud here right now.
When I met with her, that was not part of the component at all.
Well, we're, as a school district, I'm looking for that money to come back to offset the cost to this community on our portion of the lease payment going forward. Again, I don't have their finalized stuff, Tim. I'm being...
One in Saratoga, we worth some big bucks. The one in Dix Ave, Rich Trimmer on a buy for nothing.
I thought maybe Tim Havens would buy it.
Not a chance. I taxed
I was-
for them, I ain't barely paying attention.
I was completely joking on that part. A couple things, and they're just comments. I know we're getting. Does anybody else have comments? Because I was gonna close with a few comments if the board will indulge me for just a couple more minutes. So I appreciate your comments, and Tim's here every year. Jane's here with him. Once in a while, he's got a son or two. Although one might not live in the district anymore. He might be in Argyle now.
He's in Argyle.
Yep. He spoke to me quite a bit last year when he came to one of the votes.
Yes, we still owe him a panel on the
Yeah, well, there's a story behind that, which I got from Mr. McKeegan. But anyways, Tim mentioned, that folks are here with a life sentence. So I'm in year 28 of my career. My entire career, I just want to tell you a little about me, the people who don't know. So I grew up on a dairy farm in Fort Ann. The farm was 728 acres. My father's name was Chauncey Ward. Sometimes people know that, and it's not always for good reasons. But I put it out there. But my parents, Chauncey and Bernice, raised 4 boys on that farm. Up until the time I started working at Hudson Falls, I lived on what was left of that farm. We had to sell some of that farm. We sold it to a person who owned a lumber mill. He subsequently sold it to somebody from Long Island who's very, very wealthy. I owned that home and 40 acres in Fort Ann. When I took this is about my investment in this place. When I took the job here, one of the requirements of my job was to sell my 4th generation home that I grew up in on the farm that my wife and I had spent 20-something years renovating and making exactly what we want. I had to sell my home and move to this school district. My home was 13 miles from where I sit right now. I don't want to get into back and forth, but if that doesn't say something about investment in this place. I'm not argumentative. I do think about what's going on with our retired folks, our senior citizens. My in-laws live in this community. They're both on retirement incomes that aren't from today's wage. They're from a previous wage. I face them almost every day when I go to see them. They get the same newsletters you folks get. They do. And what I tell them when they get the news, and I would say the same thing to you folks, I understand the assessments. I understand increases in taxes. I would ask you to actually take a look at what your tax bill has changed in the last 5 years. We do look at that. Some people's taxes have gone down in the last 5 years in the town of Kingsbury. Actually, across multiple municipalities, people's school taxes have gone down. And we don't do every home. We pick a couple from each municipality and we go through them. So when I go into my mother-in-law says, hey, what's going on here, when she gets a newsletter. I'm like, let me look at your tax bill, let me see, because it's assessment versus tax rate, and there's a lot of factors, and sometimes people just see the assessment, and they assume their taxes are gonna go up. We're asking for 1.9 on the levy, which is how many dollars, Kevin?
248,000.
We're asking for an additional $248,000 total from the entire community of our school district, which is across the towns of Kingsbury, the village of Hudson Falls, town of Fort Edward, town of Fort Ann, town of Argyle, and town of Hartford. So we're, in a small piece where it cuts across the river where the industrial park is.
Dan, I just want to be 245,951.
He wants to give you the exact number. He's being wise.
I think, excuse me just a second, but I think that this year, given that number and the amount of increased value of new construction in the Hudson Falls School District, there is going to be less, the tax rate is going to be less.
Likely, but we don't have to do the crystal ball, but I would agree with you, and so
We're
would.
not going to have such a golden goose of new construction every year. And a lot of it comes from the big landlord, Skimmerhorn. He's got a major investments. You take the one right by Jenny Ray's, the new one next door, the senior complex, they just got raised millions of dollars because it's getting near being ready for occupancy. And that right there is probably going to pay your whole $200-some thousand. But the time's going to come that there's not going to be this new construction. And there may be the time that we have a crunch in housing and values abate some. And when that happens, that's when we really have to be concerned. And that's why I'm always worried about tomorrow. I'm not a live for today kind of a guy. It's sustainability, sustainability, sustainability. I want to be able to come here in 10 years and still be able to live here and pay my taxes just like you all should have to.
And then the last piece, so I want to say, I do absolutely pay attention to what our older citizens are going through when we're talking about these budgets. I absolutely do. And the last piece, Tim, you had mentioned the tax sales. So again, I grew up on a farm in Fort Ann. I'm one of those family farms that went through getting those notices that your property is going to be sold. Right? It didn't happen because we did what we had to do to make it so it didn't happen, but we got right there. And I was in college at that time, and so Dan Wolf was coming home to do what he could do to help with that. So I understand it may be better than some of the people out here. And I'm not taking that away from anybody. I hope nobody's ever in that position. I don't take it lightly is what I'm trying to say to you and everybody out here. Understand that. That's just a little about me to respond to a couple of the things you said. And I appreciate the questions tonight. If there's a final question, we're good. Otherwise, they're giving me the stink eye for making so many of my own comments because it's not really my show tonight.
I have two. Why is the payment in lieu of tax amount going down, getting off by it?
It's not, it's ratcheting down. The payments will ratchet up and then they can ratchet down.
You know, if you go, what's that site you go on to find out what the taxes are? Something to do. Image view. If you go on image view, the trash plant, which is a big topic of conversation here lately, doesn't show on image view as paying school taxes. How much do they pay in school taxes?
The last year was 245,000.
266, 613.50. Just to the people that think they don't pay.
Yeah.
That right there, if they were to succeed, now there's no abandonment trash. Now that there's no dumps, you've got no choices. If that were to ever get shut down, everybody's disposal costs would triple at best, maybe more. But that's a lot of money going into the school district right there that people have to keep in mind. That's a lot. That's a big taxpayer. And Boralex, hydro plant is a big taxpayer. I got after the county by a few. I said, I'd like to be the highest assessed SOB in Kingsbury. And I'm not. I'm not deal there. And there's a lot ahead of us. There's a lot ahead of us. So, you know, there are other very important taxpayers. Rich Skimmerhorn's a big one. And his investment in the community continues to grow with the golf course, the computer property, on and on and on. We have to make the best of these times, and for sustainability, we've got to rein in the spending. We've got to work on health insurance. We've got to work on this bus thing. That scares the heck out of me, because if 10 years from now, if we're on a total EV bus program, we have to have our own tow truck and we'd have to have, probably 5 spare buses. I mean, you guys have to work on that. And if there's something that any of my expertise as a town hillbilly can come to help the school, come to me and put me on a committee, and I'll gladly help. Because I'm not here to complain, I'm here because I care. I want to be able to live here, I want my one son who continues to live in Kingsbury to be able to live on part of our farm, and I want our kids and my grandkids and your all great grandkids to be able to be a part of this school community. But it's all about sustainability. Nobody looks tomorrow, they all want to live for today. We get that tax bill paid, who cares till the next one comes? We don't think that way.
And Dan, if I could just say, I think it's important that you did just share what you did. And I expect every one of you to share something about why you're on this board, why you continue to be on this board. I was on a municipal board. I did it because I love community things. There are people who are on municipal boards because they need health insurance. And that is, and you know what, that's a reality. And so if you have members, as you said, that have been on for a long time, I want to know that no one's complacent. I want to know what you care about. As I was walking in, I thought, I got to find sample with you, find out, why do you want to be on the board this year? And so although it does take some time, and nobody likes to sit in meetings, you do have an obligation to tell the community what you're doing, what you're accomplishing, what your benefit, what wheelhouse you learned in your school career that brings you to a board to participate and share, that shows the education that you received from the educators before you, that you are doing the best that you can do, because complacency does happen. And you can snooze a lot in an hour and a half or 2 hours of people's time. So I appreciate that you did share that, because I want to know how much all of you care.
And I do believe that everyone who serves on the school board is a volunteer, correct?
Correct, they receive no salary, no benefits.
Yep, I think that, it's a true commitment, and I thank you for that. Stop nodding your head, because we pay you.
You do. But I appreciate that as well.
If there's no further questions, you can close the hearing with that.
Okay. Jane, we'll get you that answer if you'd like, as far as what we do. Does anybody else have any other questions?
For sure, Jane, the 3 people that are up for the seats, their information, it's on our website.
Oh, no, I've seen it all.
Okay, I'm just making sure.
I want face-to-face. Because you wonder, why this year? Why? So you know what, do they think something isn't? Does somebody get on the board because they think something isn't being done? Is it they want to add to, that they truly are, they have a service card?
A skill set,
A skill set, that was good. So it was very helpful.
You've gotten here a few times, so.
All right, I just need a motion to adjourn the budget. Megan, second, Amanda, all in favor? Opposed? Carries.
And we're rolling into our regular meeting. You're all welcome to stay for the regular board meeting, but the budget hearing part is over with. Totally up to all you folks. We will not be offended either way.
See Maggie give you the phone, and then
She actually gave it to Amanda. Well, I knew I forgot it, and I was like, I don't even care, to be honest with you. Like, well, a lot of times I get messages from everybody.
So Brett, will you make it 2 recordings?